What is going on, folks? Welcome to the very first Criticless Cast News segment. We're coming off the weekend and it's a Monday, and I figured we'd just do some box office talk and touch in a little bit on what's going on with Paramount and them selling the company. But then we had some news fresh off the press here involving Nicolas Cage and Jesus. So let's get into it, folks. All right. So this spicy news involving Nick Cage here is wild and a bit ridiculous. And basically, what is going on is he has a film called The Carpenter Son, which is coming out starring him and FKA Twigs, who I'm not extremely familiar with, and also Noah Jupe. So this dropped just before we were going to start recording. And I figured we'd just dig straight into this because it's ludicrous. Essentially, what is going on here is they are saying that this is actually going to be a horror film involving the Jesus and his family. So they've got some photos here of the actors, and it sounds like what this article is posing is that Nick Cage is actually going to play the father of Jesus, Joseph, and Mary is going to be played by FKA Twigs, and Noah Jupe is actually going to be playing a young Jesus, which this just sounds absolutely bonkers. So yeah, right here, Nicolas Cage, FKA Twigs, and Noah Jupe. And then there's another name on here, which they're not saying who she's playing or what's going on with her. So I'll just leave that out for now. But basically, the director, Lofty Nathan, is doing this film, The Carpenter's Son, and it is exploring the rarely told story of the childhood of Jesus with a horror take. So we're talking about an art house horror film. Big surprise starring Nicolas Cage here, but this everything involving the biblical component of this, I feel like it's just going to be a hot topic for news coming forward as this movie actually comes out, because I'm guessing that this is going to bristle some folks, being that it's involving the story of Jesus. So it says that Nathan has taken inspiration from the infancy of the Gospel of Thomas and this screenplay that he's building here and the childhood of Jesus. So it says, per the official synopsis, The Carpenter's Son tells the dark story of a family hiding out in Roman Egypt. The son, known only as the boy, is driven to doubt by another mysterious child and rebels against his guardian, the carpenter, which would be his father, revealing inherent powers and a fate beyond his comprehension. As he exercises his own power, the boy and his family become the target of horrors, natural and divine. So I can't even wrap my head around exactly what this movie is going to be, but it sounds absurd. And I mean, if we're getting full Cage as the father technically of Jesus, and we've got the age gap here between these two characters, you can see between Twigs and Cage, that is, I guess, kind of lines up. They say that Mary might have been somewhere in her early to late teens, but Joseph was supposedly in his possibly 20s or 30s, but there are people that speculate that he was actually even way older than that. So who knows? But either way, they're definitely mixing the races up a bit here, because obviously Nick Cage is a white dude, not a Jewish guy. Same for, at least traditionally, as far as how you would consider biblical times. Same for Noah Jupe. And then Twigs is Jamaican and I think some level of Hispanic. So they're really just going all out there with the casting. But this movie just sounds absolutely absurd, and I felt like we needed to touch on it because there is no telling what this is going to be, and we need to keep an eye on The Carpenter's Son, because at best it's going to be absolutely absurd. And if the Christian community gets up in arms about this, I'm sure that they will have some stuff to say. So moving on from that, I did want to touch into the box office. Now, this weekend was the release of Fall Guy, and actually apparently Garfield got a release overseas, and it did make some money. Apparently they're saying 22 million here, so I'm not exactly sure. I had no idea that this was even coming out overseas over the weekend, but it has Chris Pratt, so people are going to freaking show up. But the main thing I wanted to focus on was Fall Guy. So we've been getting a lot of conversation within Criticless about this, and a lot of our users are starting to give pretty high praise for it. We are currently sitting at 21 voters and a 74%, which is a rad. So this is doing pretty well. We have some content creators who have dropped reviews. We got Salty Nerd at an 85% most excellent, which is really high. And then a lot of our usual suspects like Shorty Short is in here with an 85% as well. And then Savvy dropped in really fairly early with an 80%. And so it's doing really well by most folks on the app, and I think it will continue to stay that rate. But the problem is that even though this movie is doing well as far as the reviews, it is not making the money that it needs to make. Now, this Deadline article here points out that they did 65 million worldwide, but actually here in the US, it only did about 25. Now, Geeks and Gamers, Odin over there actually projected it a bit higher than that, saying that he thought it hit around 28 million. But either way, this is lower than they were speculating it to be, which was around the 30 million mark. So it's still just not making a ton of money. And this is a fairly weak box office opening, especially considering what it's sounding like this movie cost to make. And it looks like, according to Odin here with Geeks and Gamers, it might be losing around $100 million, which is going to be wild. And a lot of the projections here aren't including marketing numbers or anything, because this was 130 some odd just to make, not including marketing. So Fall Guy, as even though we have fairly solid numbers coming in from the box office, the problem is actually going to just come down to what it costs to make this thing, and that people aren't showing up like they used to. And we're not exactly sure what's going on here, if this has to do with streaming or just with everything getting shut down in COVID and people just not turning up to the box office the way they should. Because you would think Ryan Gosling, after coming off of Barbie, this would have exploded and done mega numbers. And really, I consider this to be a little lukewarm. Now, it's not bad for box office for where we've been lately, but the fact that the number 2 in the box office is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, on a re-release is kind of wild and a little bit ridiculous, because, I mean, obviously that movie is kind of old, but it was May the 4th weekend, and so they decided to release Episode 1 again. We've got more reviews popping into Criticless as well for that, and just because of May the 4th. But the fact that that is in second place when Challengers has been doing well, it was at a almost 50% drop on its second weekend, which honestly to me isn't a huge surprise, considering that that's more of an indie art house film. And then Tarot came out, and we reviewed that actually on Criticless Cast. Go check out our review. You can this is one of those, just check out the review, listen to us sling some hate on this movie, but you don't need to go see it, because Tarot is terrible. So just don't do it. And it only made 6.5 million. Now, granted, that was a horror film. It's probably on a fairly smaller budget and a little cheap, but still, the box office is not doing what it needs to be doing for opening up right into the holiday weekend. Now, I did mention overseas, we had Garfield coming out at fairly high numbers with the worldwide projections here for it coming out overseas. So that could predict well for this upcoming weekend. It's the first family movie in a little bit here, and it's probably going to be pretty solid. And it's Chris Pratt, like I said, so people show up. So this next weekend between Planet of the Apes and Garfield, we could have some pretty solid numbers. So we'll definitely look out for that and touch in on it next Monday. So that's probably what we'll start doing on our Monday shows. So as far as that goes, I mean, that's basically it for the box office. I mean, if you have seen Fall Guy, hop into Criticless, drop your review. We want to know your thoughts and what you think, but it's doing fairly well and people are liking it. So maybe show up, this week or over the weekend, because I think that really for these larger budget movies to happen and to continue, people need to show up or they're not going to be making them. Now, granted, this is a rom-com that costs 100 and something million to make. That's a really large price tag for a rom-com. And I think that that's part of the problem, is that this wasn't either genre, but it was a very high budget film. And so people just weren't sure if they should turn up for this. And that's what we're seeing at the box office. Now, the last thing that I was going to touch on was actually what's going on over at Paramount. And I have not heard a lot of people talking about this, so I kind of wanted to update you guys on what's going on. And basically, what has been happening over the past month is that Paramount is not doing well at all. And they ended up coming out and announcing that they were in an extreme amount of debt. And so now they're talking about selling the company. Well, over the past month, they have actually been in talks to sell to Skydance. And I'm sure you've seen their logos or familiar with the studio, but essentially they make films and they're a production company. But the thing is that the industry folks would like for Skydance to be the people that purchase Paramount and all of their properties. Reason being, it doesn't become as much of a monopoly. There is not the federal government involved and just all of the red tape when it comes to a big company that does the same thing, purchasing them. So now we're looking at an issue, though, where they did not take Skydance up on their deal. And we are talking about big dollars here. In the article, they kind of get into the nitty gritty. We will put all these in the show notes if you want to take a look at what I've been talking about today. But basically, Sony is swooping in, and this could make things hairy because they have put in a $26 billion cash bid, which is, from what I gather, the same bid that Skydance put in. So they're just trying to come in neck and neck at the same dollar amount that Skydance is and just see if they can push them out. Now, I don't know why as far as making this a quick deal, why it would be more beneficial for them to allow Sony/Apollo to buy them versus Skydance, because Skydance is going to be a much easier deal. But they drug their feet, I guess, just to see if they could bring somebody in. And my guess is that they're going to try and jack those Sony numbers up higher and make more money from a bigger outfit. Now, it says Sony and Apollo are in talks here. So Sony and Apollo, actually, it turns out that Apollo is a global private equity firm. So we're getting outside money outside of just Sony involved with this. So there's just going to be a lot more fingers in the pot. So like I said, industry folks would like Skydance to buy it. But it sounds like on the stock front, it's actually that stockholders would prefer that more of a deal go through like Sony and this private equity firm. So we will see at the end of the day what happens, but Sony is coming in with the same bid, and I'm sure that Paramount is going to try to jack that up and get that number a bit higher. So we should definitely keep an eye out. But the big thing to note here is just the simple fact that a large company like Paramount has announced that they have the amount of debt that they have. And it's just looking like Paramount is not doing good and could go under if they don't sell. So this is pretty much a guaranteed. So over the next few weeks, month, whatever, we should definitely keep an eye out for what's going on with Paramount, because they have their own streaming service, and there's just a lot involved in that company and a lot of properties like Star Trek, for one, which has not been doing well. And another of other properties that Paramount has just not been handling properly. So we should just really keep a lookout for this Paramount deal, and I'll touch back in on it if there's any any advancements in what is going on here. But this could definitely get into legal territory and get messy. So make sure to look into our show notes, check out and see what is going on with the Carpenter and Nic Cage. And we will definitely touch back in on that as well once the trailers and things start dropping, because it's going to be absolutely ludicrous. And we'll watch the box office and touch back in next Monday. But guys, as always, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, comment, do all those fun things, because it helps us. Our channel's fairly new. And make sure to go watch those Criticless Cast Unhinged videos. We do those big movie reviews every Thursday, which drops on Fridays, and we're touching on new movies every week, unless we decide to mix it up a little bit and do a audience loved, critic hated, or vice versa. So make sure to just go do all of that and sign up for Criticless. If you don't have an account, download the app in Android or Apple in the app stores, or on web, go to criticless.com. And until next time, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Later.